Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where I talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Legacies. A lot of interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, kind of focusing on some of the other smaller aspects of the episode first. Let's start off with obviously it turns out, Dorian is talking to Ethan, but Ethan doesn't remember anything about him and MG's. It's like, oh yeah, we have classes together, but we're not really friends, which is like, oh, it's so sad to know that friendship is, no more. You already knew it was a thing because he compelled him, but it's still just sadder just to have that reiterated like that. So him and Rick are looking for MG, but there have been some missing people nearby, and so the area that MG is in is where those people went missing. So Dorian immediately thinks the worst. And I was like, man, why are you being so negative about it? It's like, right, and then you had Rick bring up right, his family was killed by a Ripper, in particular Stefan. And you would think after all this time it would have not been as much of an issue, especially considering you've been around MG enough. You know he's a Ripper, so not unless that was something Rick kind of kept from him at first, and then he found out along with everyone else later on when it was revealed that he was a Ripper. Not unless that was it. I don't think that was the circumstance. He had to have already known that MG was a Ripper, because the only person who didn't know, I think, were the students. In particular, Caleb didn't know. But so obviously Dorian's going to have that certain spot with him, but like I said, I thought you would assume he wouldn't hold a grudge against MG because it's right, MG is who he is. But to be fair, Stefan was who he was, and we found out he was a Ripper. Stefan didn't have the super copacetic past. He had a bloody past. Granted, no one will ever outweigh the Michelsons when it comes to the amount of blood spilled over the years. Always have to put that out there. It's yeah, Stefan was a Ripper, but man, was he no Michelson. Was he no Klaus Michelson? It's always sad that Klaus is always going to have that stipulation of, you always got to remember, yeah, you came off heroic, asterisk, does it 100% make up for the 1,000 years of bloodshed you cause? Yeah. The backstabbing your family and daggering them and locking them away for centuries at a time? Who knows? Regardless of all of that, Dorian's immediately thinking nah, MG's bad. But obviously for Rick, he's nah, let's kind of find MG first. The moment they find MG, he's covered in blood. Dorian immediately knocks him out. But it's if Dorian wasn't so biased, he would have noticed. If you look at MG, it's not just his blood, not blood just on his clothes. Even look at his cheek is clawed up. He has injuries. So that would have showcased it was something else, that it was another Malivore monster. But his reason for not believing it was because it's out and outside of Mystic Falls, but just who's to say they haven't just there's not just one on the outskirts. I guess he just didn't think about it, because I guess ultimately we end up finding out the creature's a Wendigo, which I thought was interesting. And I love that being a thing of you won't believe it, Rick, it's a Wendigo. He said, what? It's never a Wendigo, which I love that that's a whole thing of yeah, that's been a bit for a while, oh yeah, it's never a Wendigo. Now it turns out it actually is a Wendigo, especially when Dorian's believing it's MG. But it's also interesting on many different levels, because we actually think about it, if I'm not mistaken, the second case Sam and Dean ever worked on Supernatural, the second episode, was a Wendigo case, if I'm not mistaken. And it's also, I won't spoil it, there's a video game that revolves around them. I'll leave it at that, just so I don't end up spoiling the video game for anyone that's ever played it, because it's kind of a reveal in the game of what the hell is going on. So it's just interesting that a Wendigo did it. So that's just kind of interesting. Because he buried that guy, and it is that complicated thing of Mystic Falls, and obviously that's the reason why Matt had the issues he did, because it's right, you cover up all these deaths, it's right, your family will never know what really happened to you, but for Dorian, it's maybe thinking you're going missing is a lot better than knowing the truth, because even if they found out the truth that he's dead, they'd have so many unanswered questions, because all it'll be tacked up to is oh yeah, wild animal, because that's been the excuse since the beginning of the Vampire Diaries. They still haven't come up with a better excuse for it. You think, but I guess it's also it happens sporadically enough where people don't latch on, unless it's the smarter people who are more aware of what's going on. But for Dorian, it's I know exactly how you feel, having, your family's going to had to deal with the loss of you, but never really knowing the truth. He knows the truth, but that kind of weighs on him, hence why we're in this situation. But obviously Dorian's I was wrong about MG. The cave that they're in, it's revealed that that's where MG's been staying the entire time. He just kind of needed to be away. But they look through his journal, and he's been saving a whole bunch of people. He's been doing a superhero thing. And obviously it's still got the Blursome and Essential, and it's oh. And it's but he still needs to work on. He needs to work on his superhero names, which is so interesting, because it's that this line coming up the week we say goodbye to Cisco on The Flash. And Cisco's the name machine when it comes to Flash. So I think that's just kind of interesting timing. Was that on purpose? No, but I think it's actually just kind of interesting to think about. But obviously the Wendigo shows up and it's like, well, what are we going to do? Like, how are we going to fight it? And MG ends up killing it because it's revealed. That's so interesting. Because the mythology with Wendigos. Well, side note, it's like, if you get scratched by a Wendigo, you become a Wendigo. I guess, I don't know if that's always the canon. Because Wendigos come about, and this also depends on, like, the continuity of this, because they didn't really go into it. But it's like, Wendigos are born from cannibalism. It's like basically when you start eating, when you cannibalize, like it's because Wendigos are a Native American thing. From the mythology, I think it's like basically a spirit inhabits your body after you've eaten human, like cannibalism. Like if you go once you become cannibalistic, like then a spirit possesses you and you become a Wendigo. I think that's how the whole thing works from my recollection. So I don't know if this is like, oh, it's just a Wendigo. It's just a natural creature that this was it's not like, oh, this was once a human and it became this. It's like, nah, this was just, because like a lot of like monsters they met, I mean, some ended up being like the Banshee was just like a normal woman before she became like the Banshee. So maybe not. But I thought it was interesting. It's like the thing about their hearts being made of ice. I was like, oh, I think this is the first time I've ever heard that about Wendigos. I don't know, maybe that's truer to Wendigo lore. Maybe that's just legacy lore. Either way, I thought that was fascinating. Because basically, it's like, yeah, their heart is made out of ice, like how the sunlight is a weakness to vampires. And he's like, so I use my weakness against him. So like basically, he took off his ring so that his hand would be on fire, so he could reach in and basically rip out his heart, which is like a go-to like vampire move if you're not like slashing someone's head off, i.e. Damon knocking off Kai's head in like season 6, or was that 7? I think that was 6, maybe, I don't remember. Yeah, I think that was season 6. Ergo that, but then like it just seemed but like that was a go-to thing of always like just ripping out vampires. So it's a go-to way just to straight up kill them too, but so MG saved the day, and obviously the whole thing with Alaric being like, you can always come back to the school, because for MG it's like doing this whole thing of saving people is hard enough on his own, and it's like, well, you can always come back to the school. But for MG it's like, I'm gonna tell you the truth about Ethan. I learned from it and I corrected my mistake, but yeah, I ended up compelling him to forget everything. But if I am going to go back to the school, I don't want to stop saving people. And Alaric's like, yeah, so let's do it. Because that was a conversation he had with Dorian, because Dorian's like, oh, you're going to just automatically believe like that, he's innocent. But like, it's because Alaric's like, assuming the worst in people kind of brings out the worst in me, and he doesn't want to do that anymore. He's trying to be a better person. He's trying to fix a lot of his like issues, and obviously when it comes to his daughters, and just when it comes to who he is, he's trying to fix that. So granted, it's like, so also I love the MG being like, the reason why he knows this is because he had the pull for Wendigo, so it's like things worked out, so yay. Which that wasn't the only betting this episode, because we had the showdown between Finch and Jed, the whole alpha thing, because he is the alpha. It's like he gets to, it's more so like, I don't know if most alphas have, like, most wolf packs have that. I mean, the hierarchy is there, but I don't think they're teenagers, so it has that, like, jock mentality of, like, yo, I'm head honcho, I get to dictate who does what. It's like, so, like, I play, like, hard and rough, so, like, I can push, but I'm not going to fight a girl, like, specifically, it's like, sparring and stuff like that's fine. I'm not going to fight a girl, like, to the death. It's just not my thing. But, like, for him, he's, like, all about the other rules of, like, all right, like, the newest member of the pack has to kind of do the laundry and stuff like that. It's like, oh, yeah, like, Home Dude here ended up having to do it. And it's like, all right, she challenges him to, I guess, what's the proper name for it? Because I've always known it to be pull, but I think it's like billiards. It's like, I think that's the British terminology for it, billiards. I think. I could be, I think that's the British terminology. I think here in the States we just refer to it as pull. But it was interesting, like, he's all confident and everything, and then his dude is like, yeah, I should also let you know, we kind of let you win every time you beat us. He's just like, what? It's like, yeah, you're an alpha. Like, why wouldn't we let you win? It's like, but also, why would you literally wait till the last second to tell him this? And so you got your girl, bitch, kicking major ass and just embarrassing Jed. He's just kind of like, huh, ass to take it. But then you see the look on Finch's face when she looks at Jed's face and sees how much this means to her. So she kind of throws the game, which she asks later on, like, why? It's like, for her, it's a situation where being the leadership be about who's the strongest and this and that. But when she's like, when I looked at how important this was to you, how much you care about the pack, I realized kind of like you were the best, you know, that you deserve to keep this, like, you know. And for him, you know, it's a conversation that they had about, you know, maybe things should change, because Jed even talks about, like, at one point in time, like, Finch showing quote unquote weakness like that, he would have called her out for that, like, because he was a mega jockhead. But, like, obviously, like, Jed's grown and changed quite a bit, you know, become a very reliable person over the course of the series. So he has a very different perspective on things, and you know, and it's like, well, you're not. If you can change, maybe the rules can too. So, you know, applying some of those changes to the pack and everything. But I'm like, hey, and I think Jed got a good, like, potentially right hand, like, to, like, leading the group, because I think Finch will be the perfect right hander, just like how things should run, and I think she's the tough badass that she is, you know. So I think that should. I don't know, I think that'd be kind of interesting if she kind of served like a more advisory role, like for the Alpha, like kind of being a second in command. Because I don't know if she would necessarily want to be Alpha. Like, she wanted it just to kind of put Jed in his place, but also it's like, right, I don't think that's kind of her cup of tea anyway. Having always kind of been the loner, I don't know. Maybe she'd be more comfortable in that, but I don't know. That'd be kind of interesting. I was almost wondering if Jed was going to do the thing of, like, actually giving it to her anyway, because, like, right, because you don't want it means that you should have it that much more, because you're not. I forgot what that is. Like, I'm pulling that from something, and I thought it was such an interesting aspect of something. It's like, because you don't want it means even more reason why you should have that position of power, because you're not power hungry enough to be like, I want it more than anything. The fact that you don't means you deserve it all the more. So I thought maybe we'd have something like that. Could always go that route in the future. So there's that. But obviously the big thing is Hope is dealing with the aftermath of everything with Landon, and she's super upset. And we've been seeing her powers kind of flexing and going wild, because obviously your powers as a witch are tied to your emotions. So Hope gets dragged away by Josie, who's like, oh, I haven't heard from Lizzie in like a week. And they go up there, but it turns out the whole thing was a setup, because Josie wanted to kind of help Hope in her own way. It's like, right, this helped Lizzie, like, maybe it can help Hope too. And then immediately they get there and you're like, oh, I've never seen the movie, but this is some Midsummer shit right here. As literally the episode title, you know, Hope says, like, oh, this is a little culty. And then it's like, no, we're just these people who follow someone who's a charismatic leader. Okay, a lot culty. But obviously they have those pendants, which are like a reflection of, like, oh, whether you have negative emotions or not. And blue is like the highest level and stuff like that. And, you know, you have Lizzie being on top, and it's like, she's like kind of being like, oh yeah, Samantha's just mad because I'm the best now. It's like, you came off a little gloaty down, like, oh, those negative emotions aren't really there, because you're kind of like smug about being on top and everything, and that Samantha like fell rock bottom because she's like red and everything. So, but obviously the moment it's like, oh, do I have a volunteer? Oh, Hope. The moment she was like, Hope, it's like, okay, so you're definitely the thing that Clark met earlier in the episode, like 18 months ago, getting something that was locked away that had to work for him. I figured it had to be you, because you were like, you immediately go, and you hope. It's like, right. Yeah, Lizzie told you a lot, but you were hoping for that. You probably knew exactly who Lizzie was. Who suggested this in the first place? I wonder, did Lizzie find this on her own? Was it recommended? I don't know if her dad signed her up for this, because it could have just been a recommendation to him. But yeah. And Hope goes up because she doesn't believe in all this. She thinks the lady Andy's a fraud and everything. Touches a crystal, is like, ooh, bright red. And it touches her and takes away all her, like, takes away all her anger and stuff, and now she's a blue crystal. I thought it was interesting because she's like, right, if I take my gloves off, I mean, I guess it makes sense, but like, could an empath's powers work through gloves? I feel like you would need skin-to-skin contact for an empath's powers to actually work. I mean, maybe I could be wrong, but I guess for her, it's like the justification is like, if I do it, it becomes too powerful, and then we get into like a complicated territory. But like, you wearing gloves just made me seem like I felt like that was BS. But whatever the case may be. And obviously you have Lizzie immediately getting super angry. Crystal goes from goes from blue to dark red. She got jealous, and she ends up bringing that up to Andy. And he's like, oh, I can't help you right now, but yeah, come back later. It's like, we're moving up the ritual. Oh, is it because Hope, she's so special? Like, Lizzie's like, this is the place I was supposed to shine, and now I'm back to the bottom. So she's just scrubbing stuff with Samantha. Samantha's like, that's not how you do it. It's like, you would know better than me because that's all you've been doing. And it's like, well, I'm going to get back. It's like, how about for now we just like call a truce? We're both at the bottom of the barrel right now. But then we get the reveal of like whatever it is that like puts them in that psychedelic everything's great phase is the gloves. So it turns out it's a product from Triad that basically has a psychedelic effect that kind of basically woos people. Interesting timing because I made that whole reference about Cisco and stuff like that. That's what happened in this week's episode of The Flash. It was kind of basically a meta who had that ability. So it's interesting how that kind of works like that, especially because we're dealing with multiple colors, and like this particular meta was Rainbow Raider 2.0. I'm like, the parallels are just interesting. Like I know that's super not intentional, but it's just funny that these particular episodes air the same week and everything too. The first week that the Flash is back since like its week break last week, and obviously Legacies have been on a 2 to 3 week break. So, like I said, just interesting timing. And she tries to tell warn Josie and Hope, but they're already in a spell, and it's like, oh. So, but it turns out, it makes you wonder, I guess, she could never be fully controlled, because I think Lizzie kind of like submitted herself to it a little bit on the subconscious level because she wanted it to help, because she's always struggled with her emotions, which I love that Andy's like, oh, you come from the life that you have, you've never had to struggle. I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? Her entire life was a struggle. Even before she was born, it was a struggle because their uncle was trying to kill their biological mom. Then, like, they've had one thing after another. She lost a boyfriend, Sebastian. That whole thing, like Lizzie's had her struggles. Plus, like, her emotions have always been something she's had to struggle with. Them being Geminis, the whole, like, supposed to absorb the other twin thing. Like, Lizzie hasn't had, like, the quote-unquote easiest life. Granted, yes, they had a little bit of comfort because their dad kind of acted as a buffer that kind of let them kind of do whatever they wanted to, both him and Josie, so they never really fully suffered the consequences, but they still had their struggles regardless, so it was interesting. But I guess Andy's talking from her position of, like, oh, I was a literal prisoner, because Triad, like, no monster actually works for Triad. Triad manipulates you and forces you and tortures you to use your powers to hurt and torture other people to get whatever they want. You had no choice but to comply. We were prisoners. So for her, she's doing all this because she finally gets to be free. But the reason I was bringing that all up is because she was wondering why Lizzie wasn't fully under the spell, and it's because Lizzie's brain chemistry is the way it is. There was something else that kind of did that I thought was kind of interesting, where I was thinking, like, maybe someone's brain chemistry of having, like, I'm trying to remember what it was. I want to say it was something superhero related, where it's like the way someone's mind worked, it kind of prevented them from, like, something potentially affecting them. I don't remember what it was off the top of my head, but it makes you wonder, like, is that the reason why? Like I said, she kind of gave herself over to it because she was kind of like, nah, I want this to work. I want to change. I want to kind of move away from my negative emotions. Like, so she kind of embraced it and gave into it a little bit more while it could take effect, but it never had full enough effect to completely have her under the spell. So she eventually, it's like, right, using those negative emotions, she activates negative emotions in other people. So she calls out Josie about, like, oh, right, she basically made some wisecrack about your relationship or something lasting like you just started a relationship. Oh, that lasted as long you as Dark Josie lasted longer or something like that. She made some wisecrack about her being Dark Josie, and it worked. And so when the time came to try and break Hope of the spell, it's like, I've got years of baggage to kind of use against Hope, but they end up knocking Lizzie out, and it's up to Josie to do it. And Josie's like, yeah, that color, it's not real, and it doesn't look good on you. And Hope's just like, well, thanks for your feedback or something like that. It's like she doesn't want to hurt anyone's feelings, but she kind of has to go in on her because it's like, right, you want to blame Landon? You and Landon have not, it's basically, sadly, you are determined to never be compatible because you literally, it was kind of determined the moment you guys had sex and you kind of dissolved him because of it. And she was kind of like, stop, don't say his name. It's like, and it was really interesting because she was basically saying like, because like for Hope, it's like everything I've done for him, I saved him, I went through so much for him. But for Josie, she ends up bringing up something interesting. It's like Landon had the courage to kind of do something you never could, and that was let go. Because that's always been her issue when it came to Landon. She could never let go. Once again, her trauma of everything that she's lost, makes her reluctant to let go because she's lost so much she doesn't want to lose anyone else. But it's like Landon had to let her go because this was necessary for both of them. Because also like how far and beyond Hope was willing to go on so many occasions just to save Landon. It put everyone else in danger, her going down that route. So, but in the process, Hope wakes up and then jumps down and is like, all right, ladies, go ahead and come at me all at once and I can basically kick your asses and you can immediately regret it afterwards. And she proceeded to kick everyone's ass and Andy's the last one standing and she says a deal was made. Granted, none of them remember Clark because of Malivore and everything, so she can't even remember he's the one that did this, but they're assuming later on when it's like, right, when we're dealing with Triad and a pit, it can only mean one thing, so it's like, oh, we're about bringing Malivore to this world potentially. So Andy decides, you know what, if I'm going to die either way, by doing whatever I'm about to do, or if I don't complete the contract, I die, but it's like, if I do this by sacrificing myself to be the sacrifice, you guys will have to deal with it. So she throws the Triad potion or whatever on them. And I'm like, it didn't seem like it had any effect, but it seemed like, right, I guess it's so potent that it took a while to activate. So it's like, right, so where's this all going to take us? They're waiting around the fire, waiting for whatever it is to pop up. And, Lizzie and Josie have Josie and Hope have a very heart-to-heart about right, everything you said is something I needed to hear. I just wasn't willing to hear it because you're right. It is something I knew. I just wasn't willing to accept. We've seen that time and time again. There's a lot of stuff she already knew. She just wasn't willing to accept. So, this finally, and, it's like at the very least, Hope is trying to make her feel better. It's like, it's okay that you're happy. You're kind of worried about me and Lizzie because you found out Lizzie was happy. You wanted me to be happy. And it's like, it's okay. I'm kind of going through what I'm going through. But at the very least, it shouldn't take away from you being happy. You deserve to be happy. And then all of a sudden, Lizzie's like, I know what she was trying to do. Turn us into pandas. And she's in a panda suit. I'm like, wait, what? And then all three were in a panda suit. And we got Afro Man's Cause I Got High playing. I'm like, dude, is this oh god, teenagers getting high, man, this is wild, dude. And they're seeing each other as pandas, and you have literally you have Josie making panda puns. Side note, some people hate puns. I love puns, because even later on it's like, we got to do this, or it could be, and she's like, pandemonium. It's like, oh, I love it. It's so good. They're they're blitz out of their minds, dude. I love it. It's so good. And it's like, right. We need to we got to focus on whatever comes out of that pit. And they're just laughing and stuff. And then whatever it does comes out of the pit. It's like, oh my God, we're still high, but at least we're not pandas anymore. But it turned, and then we immediately see the thing walk out, and it's legitimately Darth Vader. I'm like, wait, what? Why? I mean, this show's had Star Wars references before. I'm like, has it all been leading to the point that we have this show's version of Darth Vader? It kind of reminds me of Darth Vader. The mouth kind of reminded me of a bug, a fly or an insect or something. So it looked like a crawl. Because immediately I was like, because before it got close, I was like, is that Darth Vader meets the Predator? Still could be, but especially the mouth part of it. But I'm like, what the hell could that even be? Because I was like, oh, it's not Malivore, so could this potentially be did Clark want to summon something that could, in case things didn't work out, he could kill his dad to get free of him to some extent? So, or is it still about finding the perfect vessel for his dad? So is that what that's supposed to be? Is this going to be some world destroyer thing? I have no idea. I'm so excited to find out, though. We'll ultimately have to wait and see where all of this ends up taking us going forward to the next episode. We also never found out what happened to all those witches. I mean, I guess they're free of the spell, so they just kind of went back home. yeah, it was meant to draw them all in because she needed their power, plus having hope there, plus being the final sacrifice after the spell did its thing. It just needed one final push, and she was able. I mean, she finally got her freedom after everything. So I guess for her, it's like, oh, I get the enjoyment of completing this while also giving a middle finger to you guys for, oh, I could have gotten away with it too if it wasn't for you meddling kids type of thing, So, like I said, we'll ultimately have to wait and see where it all takes us. But really, that's all I want to talk about. So the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.